They say high school doesn't really leave you. That even when you're older, with a different job, different address, different name on the mailbox, a piece of you is still standing in those fluorescent lit hallways, hearing the echoes of 1,000 half-forgotten conversations. I used to think that was just nostalgia until I realized some echoes never stop. They just follow you. 15 years ago, we did something cruel. We thought it was harmless, stupid teenage cruelty, the kind that gets laughed off in those cliché coming-of-age movies. We trapped a classmate in a locker. Not for long, just enough to scare him. But when the janitor finally let him out, it wasn't him who stepped back into the hallway. We never talked about it afterward. Not to each other, not to anyone. You'd think a thing like that would fade, that life would get loud enough to drown it out. But lately, it's been coming back. Not as a memory, but as something else that taps against my window at night, even when I live 3 stories up. Something that whispers my name from places it shouldn't be able to stand. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe because I think it's found me again, or maybe because I think it's looking for someone new. Either way, you need to hear what happened. You need to know why you should never, ever open a locker if you hear something knocking from inside. I haven't told anyone this before. Not my wife, not my parents, not even the guys who were there with me that day. And God knows, we all still remember. But you seem like someone who's seen strange things too. Someone who wouldn't just laugh it off, or tell me it's just guilt eating at me. Promise me something before I start. Promise me you won't go looking for it. You won't try to find the school, the hallway, or the locker. I know curiosity's a hard thing to kill, but if you have any sense left, you'll let this one stay buried. I'm only telling you because I think I've found a way to move again. Have you ever had those nights when you just know you're not alone? You can't explain it, but the air feels different, thicker. Like the shadows are watching you instead of just lying there. That's been every night for the past 2 weeks. I live alone now. Small apartment, edge of town. It's one of those older buildings where the walls have a faint, musty smell, where the paint curls at the corners, where the water pipes groan when you turn the tap. The kind of place where the street lamps outside flicker and die at midnight, leaving everything beyond your window swallowed in black. The wind moves through the trees like a whisper. Sometimes it's almost a voice. Half the time, I don't even have a phone signal out here. I told myself that was part of the appeal. No endless texts from coworkers, no calls from people I didn't want to talk to. But lately, that isolation has started to feel less like peace and more like vulnerability, like being out in a cabin in the woods, alone. No backup. It began with the knocks, soft at first. I'd be lying in bed, eyes closed, already half asleep, and I'd hear it from the wall behind me. 3 knocks. Always 3, always slow. Like someone was deciding whether they really wanted me to answer. I told myself it was the pipes in old buildings that do that, right? But the sound was too deliberate, too patient. Then came the whispers. Not words I could make out. Not exactly. My name, sometimes. Or something that almost sounded like my name twisted, dragged through a mouth that didn't know how to say it right. Other nights it was just murmuring, like voices in the next room, too low to catch but impossible to ignore. I started leaving the TV on at night, low volume, just enough to mask the silence. But some nights, even over the static of late-night channels, I could still hear it, sometimes closer. Then came the dreams. In them, I'm back in that hallway. The old high school hallway where it happened. The lockers are all open, every door hanging wide like a row of mouths ready to bite. And there's breathing deep, slow, measured. I can't see where it's coming from, but I can feel it. Warm and damp on the back of my neck. Every time I turn around, I'm staring at the locker. The same one we locked him in. It doesn't sound like much, I know, but I wake up shaking, my sheets damp with sweat, ears still ringing from the sound of metal bending. And then there's the worst part sometimes when I wake up. I'm not in my bed. Last Thursday, I woke up sitting on the floor in front of my own closet. The door cracked open. My hand was on the handle like I'd been about to open it. The carpet was warm under me, as if I'd been there for hours. The more it happens, the more I'm starting to think it isn't just dreams. I've been having these lapses, moments where I lose time. I'll be sitting at my desk with a cup of coffee, glance up at the clock, and suddenly 2 hours are gone. I'll find the bathroom light on when I know I haven't been in there all day. A chair pulled away from the table, the front door unlocked. I've lived in places with bad wiring before, with pests in the walls, with noisy neighbors. This isn't that. This is something else. A presence. I know how that sounds, but when you've felt it, there's no mistaking it. It's like being watched from a place you can't see, like your shadow is growing heavier, like the silence in the room is aware. It's been getting worse, too. Last night, I was sitting on the couch, watching some old black and white movie, when the TV went to static. Not like a channel drop full, sharp, white noise. The sound filled the room in a way that made my skin crawl. I leaned forward to grab the remote, and that's when I heard it. A voice. Behind me, not loud, not even clear, but it was right there, as if someone was leaning in close to speak into my ear. And I swear to God, it said, "Still here." I didn't turn around. Couldn't. The static on the TV cut out a second later, like nothing had happened. The room went dead quiet, and in that silence, I remembered something his voice. 15 years ago. The last thing he said before we shut that locker door. That's why I'm telling you this now. Because whatever came out of that locker that day, it wasn't just a kid. And whatever it is now, it's not stuck in the past anymore. Look, I don't believe in ghosts. I didn't, anyway. But this doesn't feel like a ghost. It feels hungrier than that. So here I am, whispering to you in the dark, like some lunatic on the edge of sleep. Because I need someone to hear this. Someone who might believe me before it's too late. If you've ever stayed somewhere with no signal, where the nights are long and the quiet is too deep. If you've ever heard unexplained noises in the dark, or felt something just behind you when you know you're alone, then maybe you've already met it too. And if that's the case, maybe it's already listening. I know you're expecting me to dive right into the part where everything started falling apart, but if I'm going to tell you this, you need to understand the place first. Because the cabin, its location, its silence, the way it seemed to breathe wasn't just a backdrop. It was involved. You'd probably call it a cabin in the woods, but that phrase doesn't do it justice. It wasn't the quaint, polished getaway you see in real estate listings. No smiling couples sipping coffee on the porch. No varnished cedars shining in the morning light. This one was old, weather-worn. The wood siding had gone the color of ash, and the roofline sagged just slightly, like it had been carrying the weight of too many winters. There was a porch, but half the planks bowed inward when you stepped on them, and the single rocking chair looked like no one had touched it in decades, unless the wind sometimes rocked it at night. Which I would later learn it did. The trees stood unnervingly close, not the friendly scatter of pines you see in campgrounds. This was a dense wall of trunks and branches pressing in on all sides, giving the impression that the forest was leaning in to listen. It made the clearing feel too small, like the trees could reclaim the cabin if they decided to take a single step forward. Getting there had been a nightmare. The last 40 minutes of the drive were nothing but dirt roads, littered with fallen branches and potholes that could swallow a tire if you weren't careful. My phone lost its signal before I even turned off the highway, and the dashboard GPS started to flicker in and out until it froze completely. That's when I first felt that creeping unease. That's not fear exactly, but the prickling awareness of isolation. The world behind you dissolves, and there's nothing ahead but the unknown. When I pulled up, the air felt heavy, still, the kind of stillness that presses on your ear. No rustle of wind in the leaves, no chittering birds, not even the faint hum of distant insects. It was as if the forest itself had hit pause to watch me arrive. I stepped out of the car and half expected to hear the normal sounds of life start up again, but they didn't. Single quotes to inside. The cabin smelled faintly of damp wood and something sweeter, almost metallic, like rust. The first room was a cramped living area with low ceilings and two small windows that barely let in any light. There was a fireplace made of old stone, uneven, like it had been pulled from the forest floor. Above it hung a single framed photograph, a black and white picture of the cabin itself, taken from the exact spot where my car was now parked. The furniture looked mismatched, as if it had been scavenged from different decades. A sagging sofa that could have been from the 60s. A coffee table with deep knife marks on the surface, the kind you don't get from casual use. And on the far wall, a tall grandfather clock that wasn't ticking. I didn't think much of it until later, when I noticed the hands always pointed to the same time as 3:17. There was no electricity, not in any usable sense. The single bulb in the kitchen flickered dimly when I tried the switch, but the light was so weak it made the shadows seem thicker instead of chasing them away. The water ran, but it came out cold and tasted faintly of iron, and of course, no cell service. Not even a single bar. If I stood at the highest point in the cabin, I was cut off. The bedroom was at the back, down a short hallway with two closed doors I assumed led to storage. The bed was small, just enough for one person, and the blanket looked handmade, thick, woven, and smelling faintly of cedar. I should have felt comforted by that, but I didn't. The room was too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that makes you strain your ears, certain you'll hear something just beyond the edge of perception. On my first night, I noticed the mirrors. There were 3 in the cabin, one above the sink, one on the inside of the front door, and one small oval mirror in the hallway. Each had a faint warping to the glass, so that when you looked into them, the reflection felt slightly wrong. You know how some mirrors stretch or compress your image? This was subtler. My reflection would be just a fraction off-center, as though I wasn't standing where I thought I was. The locals hadn't been much help. When I'd stopped at the last gas station before the dirt road, the cashier, an older man with skin like crumpled paper, had gone still when I mentioned the cabin. "People don't go up there anymore," he'd said. "Too many stories." He didn't elaborate, and when I tried to push, he only shook his head and told me the road washed out in the spring. Stories. I didn't know what he meant at the time, but I would learn. By the 3rd day, I started noticing little things. The clock, still frozen at 3:17. My coffee mug, left on the table at night, moved to the kitchen counter by morning. The blanket on the bed folded differently than I'd left it. At first, I thought I was just being forgetful. You know how it is when you're in a new place, your routine is off, you misremember things. But it kept happening. One morning, I awoke to find the front door wide open. I know I had locked it. The old brass key was still in my jeans pocket, where I'd put it before bed. The air outside was cold, and the threshold looked disturbed, like someone or something had been standing there for a long time. And then there were the birds. I didn't notice them at first, because their absence felt natural, like the forest was supposed to be silent. But on the 4th morning, I stepped outside at dawn and realized just how wrong that silence was. Even in deep woods, you hear something like an owl, the flit of wings, the distant tapping of a woodpecker. Here, there was nothing. It was around then that I started feeling watched. Not the casual glance of a stranger on the street, but the deep, fixed stare you can't shake. It would hit me in certain rooms, usually the hallway, or when I was near the fireplace. My skin would prickle, and I'd find myself turning sharply, expecting to catch someone standing there. But the cabin was always empty. At night, the quiet became oppressive. Every small sound of wood creaking, wind brushing against the eaves took on a new weight. The kind of weight that makes you lie awake, eyes wide open, listening. That's when the sleepless nights began. And when you haven't slept properly in days, your mind starts filling in the blanks with things you're not sure are real. The forest, the cabin, the silence weren't just scenery. They were waiting. The first knock came on the third night. It wasn't loud. In fact, it was almost a polite 3 soft taps, evenly spaced, as if whoever, or whatever, was on the other side didn't want to startle me just to make its presence known. I sat up in bed, my heart already beating a little faster. The cabin was small enough that I knew exactly where the sound had come from the front door. The strange part was, I had locked it. Not just locked it, but slid the heavy wooden bar across. Before going to bed, I got up, grabbed a flashlight from the table, and crept toward the sound. My feet made almost no noise against the old wooden floorboards, but in the stillness of that place, every breath felt too loud. I reached the door, shined the beam across the frame, and saw nothing. No footprints in the dirt, no shadow shifting at the edge of the porch, no movement among the trees. I told myself it was probably the wood contracting in the cold old buildings making sounds. I went back to bed, trying to believe it. The fourth night, the knocking returned. This time, it was louder, faster, urgent. I didn't get up right away. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, counting each strike. 3 knocks. Silence. 3 more. Silence. When I finally worked up the nerve to check, the door was still locked, but the heavy wooden bar had been lowered to the floor. That was impossible. After that, things began to happen almost every night. I'd wake to the sound of footsteps on the porch, slow and deliberate, pacing back and forth. Sometimes they'd stop right outside my window, and I'd swear I could hear breathing, not quick, panicked breathing, but slow, steady inhalations, like someone savoring the moment. Then came the dreams. They weren't dreams in the normal sense. They felt invasive. I'd be standing in the cabin's main room, and someone would be whispering my name from the dark corner near the wood stove. I'd turn toward the sound, but the figure would always be just out of sight, their voice low and raspy, repeating phrases that made no sense. It's almost time. Or you let him out. One night, I dreamed I was sitting at the kitchen table. The moonlight was pouring in through the window, illuminating the dust motes in the air. The chair across from me scraped against the floor, and a figure sat down. I couldn't make out their faces. It was blurred, like a photograph taken mid-motion, but I could hear them whisper. Only this time the whisper wasn't in my head. I woke to find my chair actually pulled away from the table, angled slightly toward where I'd been lying. Furniture began to move when I wasn't looking. At first it was a small chair out of place, a mug that wasn't where I'd left it. But soon, it became more deliberate. One morning, I woke to find every single drawer in the kitchen pulled wide open, utensils scattered across the floor. Another time, I came back from fetching water from the stream to find my bed dragged 3 feet toward the center of the room. By the second week, the disturbances weren't confined to nighttime. Midday, I'd hear faint knocks coming from inside the walls. The clocks, both the one in the kitchen and the small one I kept on my nightstand, began to stop at strange times. Never the same hour, never the same minute, but always in the early morning. And when I'd reset them, they'd run for only a few hours before halting again, their ticking growing slower and slower, like a heartbeat fading away. It wasn't just the sounds. The forest itself seemed to react to whatever was happening in that cabin. Birds stopped singing when I stepped outside. Squirrels froze mid-motion and watched me with an almost unnatural stillness. One afternoon, I saw a deer standing at the edge of the tree line. At first, I thought it was normal, they're common enough out here, but then I realized it wasn't moving at all. Its chest wasn't rising. Its eyes were locked on me, unblinking. I went inside, shut the door, and when I looked again, it was gone. The worst part was the mirrors. I only had one old, slightly warped rectangle nailed above the sink. At first I thought the strange things I saw in it were just tricks of the glass. But then, One morning, I noticed my reflection wasn't moving in sync with me. I turned my head, and it hesitated before following. Just a second too slow, but enough to make my stomach twist. Another time, I swore I saw a second shadow in the glass, standing directly behind me, even though I was alone. Sleep became impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of wind through the trees felt loaded, intentional. The cabin didn't feel empty when I was inside, it felt occupied, like something had settled into the spaces between the walls. Crouched in the attic, waiting for the hours when my eyes were closed. One night, I decided I would stay awake, just to prove to myself that I was imagining it. I made coffee, sat in the armchair by the window, and kept a flashlight in my lap. Around 2 in the morning, the knocking began again. This time it wasn't at the door, it came from directly above me. The attic. 3 knocks. Silence. 3 more. The air felt thicker, as if the cabin itself was holding its breath. I didn't move. Then, slowly, the attic door in the ceiling began to shift. It didn't drop open all the way, but just enough for a sliver of darkness to spill into the room. I stared at it for what felt like hours, waiting for something to emerge. Nothing did. Eventually, the door closed again with a soft click. By then, I had stopped trying to explain any of it. The logical part of my brain still wanted to chalk it up to isolation, to the tricks that loneliness and sleeplessness can play on you. But deep down, I knew that something was watching me. Something that understood I was alone and that no one would hear me if I screamed. It was patient. That was the worst part. Whatever it wasn't in a hurry. It didn't need to scare me into running. It was breaking me down, night after night, eroding the edges of my sanity, and I could feel it working. I don't remember exactly what made me look beneath the floorboards that night. Maybe it was the faint sound, like the scratching of fingernails coming from under the bed, or maybe it was the way the wooden planks seemed warmer in one spot, as though something beneath was giving off heat. Either way, I found myself kneeling on the cold floor, my fingertips tracing the edges of the board. The wood was old, swollen from years of dampness, but it shifted slightly under pressure. It was then I noticed something strange. The nails weren't rusted like the others. They looked newer, as if someone had taken them out and hammered them back in far more recently than the cabin's age would allow. My heart was already thudding by the time I went to the kitchen for a knife. The blade was dull, but with enough pressure, I pried one of the nails loose, then another. The sound of metal scraping wood seemed far too loud in the stillness of that place. The plank came up slowly, reluctantly, like it had been sealed over to keep something in. A smell hit me first, stale, dusty, but with a faint undertone of rot, like damp paper and something older, something left in the dark for too long. I reached in, half expecting to find nothing. Instead, my fingers brushed against leather. It was a journal, black, cracked, and bound with a thin leather strap. My stomach turned as I lifted it out. The cover was warped, the pages uneven, water damaged at the edges. I unwrapped the strap, and the first page fell open on its own, as though it wanted me to see it. The handwriting was jagged and cramped, slanting downward, as if written in haste or under some kind of strain. At first I thought it was just the ramblings of someone going mad in isolation. Lines about shadows moving against the walls when there was no light, about doors locking themselves, and whispers that sounded like breathing. But the deeper I read, the worse it got. The author, no name given, spoke of the thing in the cabin. Not a ghost, not exactly. More like a presence. Something older than the building itself. They claimed the cabin wasn't just built on this land, it was built for it. A kind of offering, a place for it to reside. The pages described rules. Never sleep with your feet toward the door, never leave mirrors uncovered at night, and never ever acknowledge it when it speaks your name. I stopped reading for a moment, my breath coming slow and shallow, because it said my name, not aloud, not in a voice I could hear with my ears, but in a dream the night before. And now I couldn't remember if my feet had been toward the door when I fell asleep. Still, I kept reading. The entries grew more erratic. The author spoke of nights where they woke to find their furniture moved, chairs stacked in impossible ways, knives laid out in a perfect circle on the kitchen floor. Sometimes, there would be footprints on the ceiling, dirt falling in small showers onto their bed. And worse still, there were nights when they would wake up outside the cabin, standing in the woods with no memory of leaving. One entry made my skin crawl. It was written in a shaking hand, the ink smudged, as though the writer had been sweating or crying. It read, "It's not trapped here. We are. The cabin keeps it fed. It's the only reason it hasn't left. If the cabin falls, so do the boundaries." I turned the page, my hands trembling, and found something that made me wish I hadn't opened the journal at all. A drawing, rough, but disturbingly detailed. It showed the cabin, but beneath it, in what looked like the earth itself, something vast was curled in the dark. A thing with too many limbs, too many eyes, all closed as if sleeping. The final pages weren't even words, just scrawls, looping shapes, as if the writer couldn't stop moving their hand. The leather strap had left an indentation on the last page, like the journal had been closed in a hurry. I didn't notice the temperature drop until I set the journal down. My breath was visible in the air, a soft fog curling upward. The wood beneath me felt colder now, as if the warmth that had been trapped there was gone. Then came the sound. It started faint, like someone whispering in another room. The voice was muffled, distant, but growing clearer with each passing second. I stood, my knees stiff from kneeling too long, and strained to listen. The voice wasn't calling a name. It was calling my name, slowly. Patiently, I backed away, my foot hitting the edge of the bed. The voice stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse, and then the bed shifted. It was subtle, like the weight of a cat stepping onto the mattress, but it came from the center, not the edge. I didn't dare look. I knew, without a doubt, that if I turned my head, I'd see something I couldn't unsee. The journal lay open on the floor. My eyes darted to it, to the last coherent sentence written there. If it speaks to you, it already knows where you are. That was when the knocking began, soft at first, almost polite, like someone asking to be let in. It came from beneath the floorboards, then from the walls, then from everywhere at once. A syncopated rhythm, steady and deliberate. I don't know how long I stood frozen there, my pulse thundering in my ears. The knocking stopped as abruptly as it started. The silence pressed in, heavy and expectant. And in that silence, I understood something the journal hadn't said outright. It wasn't just in the cabin. It was the cabin. Every creak, every draft, every shadow that didn't quite belong to it was all part of it. And it had been here long before me, long before the journal's author, and now it knows my name. I don't remember deciding to leave. One moment I was standing in the cabin's hallway, the old journal still open in my hands, the smell of mildew and something far worse clinging to my skin. The next, I was shoving things into my backpack with a kind of mechanical efficiency, my fingers trembling too much to get the zippers closed on the first try. Every part of me screamed that I had to get out, that the cabin was no longer a place I was just staying in. It was something alive, something that had noticed me, and once it noticed you, I think it didn't let go. The night outside was dense, not dark in the normal sense, but a depthless, oppressive kind of black that felt almost physical. My flashlight beam didn't reach far. It just pushed back the shadows a few feet, enough for me to see the gravel path that led to the tree line. I told myself that if I could just make it to my car, I'd be fine. The key was already cold in my pocket, my lifeline. The problem was, the forest didn't feel the same as it had before. The trees were wrong. I'd walked that path a dozen times in daylight. It was simple, down the slope, past the big oak with the split trunk, and then the clearing where my car was parked. But now, with every step, The path seemed to bend in ways I didn't remember. The oak never came. The sound of my footsteps on the gravel shifted into something softer, like I was walking on damp earth instead. And underneath it, quieter but growing, was another sound, something walking when I walked, stopping when I stopped. I told myself not to turn around. I told myself to focus on the idea of the car, the smell of the upholstery, the slam of the driver's door, the relief of hearing the engine start. But the air behind me felt thicker, like if I turned, I'd see something inches from my face. My breath was ragged, not from running, but from the way fear was constricting my chest. It must have been 20 minutes before I saw the split-trunk oak, except it wasn't where it should be. The path didn't curve around it like it used to. Instead, the tree loomed directly in my way, blocking the trail completely. The trunks were closer together than I remembered, just narrow enough for something thin to slip through, but too tight for me. I should have turned back, tried another route, but the thought of walking away from the only landmark I recognized was unbearable. I pressed my palm against the bark. It was damp, almost warm, like skin. A faint vibration ran through it, steady, like a heartbeat. I pulled my hand back and realized the surface wasn't smooth wood. There were grooves, shapes, and letters, not carved with a knife, but formed naturally, like the tree had grown around the words. I leaned in and read the first few lines. It does not let you go. It will walk with you until you stop walking. When you stop, it will be there. The letters ended abruptly, the rest swallowed by the split. I didn't want to see what was inside, but the moment I stepped back, I realized I could hear the second set of footsteps again, closer now. Not behind me anymore, but just to the side, in the trees. I ran. The flashlight beam jolted wildly as I stumbled over roots and stones. The forest closed in, the branches clawing at my jacket, snagging in my hair. Every time I looked up, I swore the trees had shifted, like they were angling toward me. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't stop until I saw the glint of something metal through the trees. My car. I nearly sobbed as I sprinted the last few steps, fumbling with the keys. My hands shaking so hard the key slid past the lock twice before I got it in. The relief was a physical thing, a loosening in my chest, as I yanked the door open and threw myself inside. I slammed it shut and locked it immediately, my breath fogging the windshield. That's when I saw the windshield wasn't fogged from my breath. The condensation was on the outside, and in it, clear as day, were the outlines of 5 long fingers pressing against the glass from the darkness. I didn't think so. I started the engine, floored the gas, and tore down the narrow road away from the cabin. I didn't care about the speed, didn't care about the branches scraping the sides of the car, or the rocks kicking up under the tires. I just needed distance. I needed miles between me and that place. But after what felt like hours of driving, the road began to curve in a way I didn't recognize. Then it straightened, and I saw the cabin again. The porch light was on. The door was open. I don't remember getting out of the car. One moment I was staring at that open door, and the next I was inside again, my backpack at my feet, my flashlight on the counter, like I had never left. The journal lay open where I'd left it. The pages looked different now, darker, wetter, as if the ink was still fresh. There was no point running again. I sat down in the same chair I'd been in before, my body suddenly so tired it hurt to hold my head up. I thought about the words on the tree. It will walk with you until you stop walking. Somewhere in the walls, I heard it moving. At first it was a soft scrape, like something shifting through insulation. Then it was footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the room I was in. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just listened as it came closer and closer, until I could feel the air changing beside me. When I finally turned my head, there was nothing there, but I knew it was in the room. I could feel a cold presence pressed against my skin, breathing in sync with me. And at that moment, I understood. It wasn't the cabin that trapped me. It wasn't the forest bending space. It was me. I had stopped walking, and now it has caught up. It's strange, talking to you like this. I know I sound different than when I started. I can feel it in my own voice, the weight, the dullness, the way it drags like something is pulling me down. I haven't been able to sleep since it happened. Not really. I close my eyes, but it's not rest that comes. It's the sound of the trees bending in the wind, the scrape of something moving just out of sight, the soft, deliberate breath that isn't mine, and sometimes, when I'm too tired to fight it, I hear it whispering to me again, the same way it did out there. People tell me I've lost weight. They think it's stress. I tell them they're right, because it's easier than explaining the truth that no matter where I go, no matter how many locks I put on my door, I still feel the cabin. It's like it branded itself into my skin, invisible but deep. I could burn my clothes, smash my phone, move across the country, and it wouldn't matter. That place would still be with me. It's not a memory. It's a shadow that moves when I do. I've tried convincing myself it wasn't real, that I was overtired, hallucinating, losing my grip on reality. That's what any reasonable person would think. But then I hear the knock, always the same, always in threes. Sometimes on the walls, sometimes on the inside of my closet door. I know I'm not dreaming when it happens, because I can see the moonlight in my window. I can feel the sweat on my skin, and my heart pounds so hard it hurts. You want to know what really scares me? It's not the noises. It's not the shadows in the corner of my room that seem to lean toward me when I blink. It's the fact that sometimes, for a split second, I'm relieved to hear them, like a part of me misses it, misses the way it was out there, with every second stretching into forever. Because at least in that place, I knew exactly what was hunting me. Here, in my own home, I can't be sure if it's outside my door or if it's already in here with me. I still hear the forest, even though I'm hundreds of miles away. When I walk at night, even in the middle of the city, there are moments when the air gets too still. The hum of traffic fades, and it's like the silence has weight again. That's when I know it's close. That's when I started walking faster. I don't think it ever let me go. Maybe I didn't actually escape. Maybe I just stepped into another part of it, a place that looks like my world but isn't. Sometimes I look at the people around me, and for a moment, they don't look right. Their eyes don't blink naturally. Their mouths move just a fraction too slowly. I wonder if they've been there too. If they've seen what I've seen. If you ever find that place, the cabin, the forest, the thing waiting for you in the silence, burn it. Don't go inside. Don't try to be brave. Don't listen when it calls you by name, because it will. It will make you think it's something you've been looking for your whole life. That's the trick. It knows what you want to hear, and it will give it to you, over and over, until you stop wanting to leave. And by then, it's too late. I've thought about going back, more times than I'd like to admit. Not because I want to, but because I think maybe it won't stop until I do. Like I owe it something. Or maybe it owes me. I'm not sure anymore. If I disappear, you'll know where I've gone. Just promise me you won't follow. You've been listening to me for a while now, and maybe you're starting to think about your own nights. The ones where the house was too quiet. The ones where you heard something you couldn't explain. A footstep in the hall, a knock on the wall, the sound of your name whispered when no one else was home. I'm not here to convince you that what I've told you is real. That part doesn't matter. What matters is this: if you've ever felt that slow, creeping weight in the air, if you've ever turned off the lights and been sure something was still watching you, then maybe you already know what I'm talking about. I want you to tell me all of it. The nights you couldn't sleep, the things you swore you saw in the corner of your eye, the moments you told yourself were just your imagination, but never really believed it. Write them down in the comments. I'll read every single one. And maybe, if we're unlucky, Some of our stories will match. But before you do, a warning. If you've been hearing it lately, the knocking, the breathing, the thing that's always just behind you, don't let it catch you thinking about it too long. That's how it gets closer. So go ahead, share your story. I'm still here, for now. Just maybe don't listen to the next story alone.